Hi, it's Bridgette. Welcome to Above Life channel. The purpose here is to inspire your spirit and to fill you up with hope. Today, we are going to be having a conversation with an icon, a comedy icon. We will be talking with Ms. Lucille Ball, and it is my pleasure to be able to introduce you to her energy and vibration in the afterlife. So thank you so much for being here, Lucille. All right. First of all, the first thing I want to ask you is, I know I Love Lucy show. I know you're incredibly well known as a comedian. And I want to ask you, is Lucille Ball your name? She says, in part. It's part of a family name, but it's not my birth name or my given name. Okay. All right. And so you, iconically known for your red hair, is it all natural? I'm going to ask, because people ask me all the time about my hair, which it is natural, platinum blonde. Like, you can't dye hair to look like this. No. And she says, what do you think? She says, what do you think? I think it is naturally red, but I do think that perhaps at times it was helped to maintain that vibrant, vivid color. And she says, I'm not going to tell. Like, okay, I'm not going to tell, she says. And she's smoking, like I see her with a cigarette. Did you smoke? Oh, yes, everyone did. She said everyone did. Back in those days, you know, she says you have to recognize everyone did. You have a unique voice. She says, thank you. And I love Lucy. That's how I know you. Just funny comedian. And to have a woman that's that successful as a comedian is a huge milestone. What was that like? She says, oh, there are other comedians. She says, oh, there are many others besides me. She says, I'm just the one that maybe, that she's kind of saying like became a poster child or something, or became the poster girl or whatever, became the one that people identified with maybe. And she says, it's a lot of hard work. She says, I want people to understand that it's a lot of hard work to be in Hollywood, especially as a woman. And to declare your status as a comedic actor was pretty much unheard of. And so I just played a part, you know, a dingy housewife that, you know, loved her husband and needed him to save her. And that was pretty much the theme. That was pretty much the recipe for success in television and in storylines back in those days. And now, of course, today it's not like that. It's much more volatile and colorful, interesting. And so did you have, it was a bit of a diverse family, right? With a Ricky Ricardo, so to speak. And I think you guys were actually married in real life. Is that true? Yes. She said, yes, we were volatile. She says, volatile. Talk about volatile. I said, okay. So she said she alludes to the fact that there was drinking involved. And she says on both our parts, she says, I'll take responsibility for my part. And she said, but you know, that was normal for me. She says, I grew up in a family where my dad had a lot of, how do I say that? She says that my dad had a lot of drinks. You know, she said, I wouldn't go so far as to say he was a drunk, but back in those days, everybody was a drunk. Everyone was. And she's showing me a time like 1929, 30, 1932. I'm not sure what the significance of this, 1929, 1930, and 1932. So what that highlights for me, you guys, when I see dates and I see specific days or numbers, usually it's the one that's missing. So 1931. What is significant about 1931 for Lucille Ball? Do you know? If you do, put it in the comments below. Remember, part of our videos here at Above Life channel is enhancing the experience with your engagement. So fill it in the comments. What's significant about 1931 for Lucille Ball? All right. And she says, you know, I directed. That was part of what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to put a face on production. I wanted to be part of production. She says, I wanted to put a face. She's very like strong woman, opinionated as a woman and awesome. You know, like she's very strong as a woman and she's got a fiery temper, but I don't necessarily think she does. I think that was just the perception because of her having a voice. She says every woman that had an opinion was a big mouth, a loud mouth. and could have been classified as a troublemaker. And she said, but I didn't let that stop me. She says, after a while, you just throw up your hands and you say, this is the way it's going to be. So she wanted to be a producer. She wanted to direct. She wanted to have creative control over some of the experiences there. Okay. And she says, I did get typecast. She said, many people do. And became sort of she's like referring to the Charlie Chaplin of television as a woman. So the female version of Charlie Chaplin in television is what she's trying to describe to me. So it feels like you felt really confident about your acting abilities. Is that true? Well, yes. She said, yes, absolutely. And she says, you have to have thick skin and be willing to poke fun at yourself and be willing to kind of just roll with it. When you get an idea and you get caught up in the moment, you owe it to yourself and to the writers to follow it through to the fullest capacity, to really bring it forward as much as you can, bring the story forward. That's one of the gifts of actually being on television. You actually get to be in people's homes. And she says, I realized the importance of that. That was very, very important. So did you ever do stand-up? She says, like slapstick, she said would be more appropriate. But Carol Burnett's show, she's showing me Carol Burnett's show. Why are you showing me Carol Burnett's show? Because she says, I Love Lucy is sort of like that. It was like the premiere of what came after. She said it kind of set the stage and set the tone. And she says she feels like it's very iconic. She says, iconic program. I'm very proud of it. She says, but she's also telling me or showing me that she, like Broadway acting on stage in theater, like that's a part of her resume. And like New York, she's showing me New York City. And she says, and then she's showing me, I don't understand why I'm seeing the Midwest, Kansas? Like I see California, Hollywood, and then I see New York, and then I see like Kansas, like the in-between. Like I'm from someplace in between, like not from here, not from there, but I'm from someplace in between. But then she shows me that things were volatile a bit for her growing up. Volatile, maybe not the right word. From her family life. She's showing me her family life. It looks like her parents were immigrants, or one of her parents was an immigrant or something. Somebody was an immigrant. And it sounds like she had like a grandfather that would tell her all about culture. I don't know if it's like Yugoslavia, Russia, or Europe, Eastern Europe or something. And they just drank a lot. Is what I see. But she shows me smoking a lot herself. And she said, I played the piano. I also took dance lessons because back in those times that was encouraged. You had to really be well-rounded because it was kind of expected that you would have a part in a musical and you needed to be prepared to do all that. And that was what was expected back then. She says, I play piano. She's like, I play piano. I'm like, okay. So Lucille Ball, what do you think of Betty White? She's still around. She's like in her 90s. She is a wonderful, such a funny comedian and very well known. What do you think of Betty White? And she says, I know Betty. She says, I know her. I'm like, okay. She's saying we did something together. I see Lucille Ball, Gilda Radner, and Betty White. I don't know if it was on like a Carol Burnett show thing or if it was like a variety show, if they were all on a show together. And then she's showing me, who's that guy with the Ed Sullivan show? She's showing me him. He's the guy that kind of talks when he was smoking, right? I think that's who it is. And then she's showing me being on like the Gong Show. I don't know what that is. I don't remember. Gong Show or something? She's showing me like television appearances, that kind of thing. And okay, so what do you think of Betty White? She says, I know Betty. I worked with Betty. She said, she's a tough old broad, is what she says. She says, she outlived me. Yeah, okay, so Lucille, how old were you? If you don't mind me asking, she's like, it's so rude to ask about your age. Oh, please. Sorry. She's like, boy, you really are. I'm like, okay. I gotta ask. 80s, it looks like 80, 82, something like that. In the 80s, maybe even 86, up there. It looks like in the 80s. I know you didn't die during the 80s. I don't think you did anyway. It looks like late 90s that you actually left. Did you leave in the decade of the 90s or the 2000s? Right around there, she says. Like 98 maybe? I see an 8. 98 maybe? But old, quite a bit older. She said, yes, yes. And then she said, I had a stroke, is what she's showing me. A kind of a stroke. And it looks like it affected the brain. Well, duh, obviously a stroke affects the brain. Okay, all right, Bridgette, all right. But it looks like her brain was affected or something, and then it was like the beginning of the end, and then she couldn't function anymore, kind of thing. But it doesn't look like it doesn't look like it was long and drawn out. It looks like, I mean, it wasn't a long time after, but it looks like she had a stroke. That's what it looks like. It could have been a brain pop, like an aneurysm or something, but a stroke is what I would say. I would say it's a stroke. A stroke was the initiating circumstance for death. What kind of information would you give us from the afterlife perspective? What do you think? She's really connected to Hollywood and all the things that are going on in Hollywood have been going on, you know. What kind of an insight do you have from the afterlife perspective about that, all the stuff that the state of Hollywood today? What kind of insight or perspective do you have on that? She says, to be truthful, it's not all that different than it was before. She said, now everything is just on the outside. Like things aren't done in back rooms and hidden. She said everything is, she says, for the most part, pretty transparent. But I don't think it's necessarily easier for women to get the kind of roles that they deserve to have. And I know that there's sexism and there's ageism and there's all sorts of things that are hurdles for women. And I think it's unfair. I think it's unjust. And I think women in Hollywood should still make sure that they don't let go of the power that they have. I'm impressed with producers that are women, writers that are women, and the voices of women that are behind the scenes are making it possible for the women on the stages to be successful and to be a common voice for women. I'd like to see more plays and productions and television shows and movies that are focused on women characters. That is the primary focus, and not women in roles of needing to be saved in the traditional heroine's journey or hero's journey kind of a, you know, traditional writing recipes. I would like to see, and there has been, she said there's been a lot of great strides, but there can always be more. We can always do better. We can always do better. So I would encourage Hollywood to remember that the woman is your better half. Let's be clear on that. She says the woman. Very woman power oriented, all right? I kind of expected that from you. I kind of felt that initially before we started our conversation, that you were kind of, oh, I like that. I like that grit. And she says, and she uses the B word. She said, yeah, I could have been called that. She said, but let's just make sure that we recognize that had I been working today, had I been there now, that would have been they would have just been impressed with me and the way my confidence, you know. She said, but back then I was called that B word quite a few times, she said. And she says, I don't mean Betty, which is a reference to beautiful, right? Oh, she's so Betty, such a Betty. Hey, did you ever meet Marilyn Monroe? Oh, yes. She said, oh, yes, yes. Okay. And then she shows me a couple of other actresses as well. Vivian Lee, which I think is older than Marilyn. Yes, 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 yes. And it looks like she was married and divorced at least twice, maybe 3 times even. Twice for sure, maybe 3 times. And then she says that very volatile relationship with Ricky Ricardo. very volatile, like physical fights and things with the two of them. They both drank, but he drank more. She says, well, he probably drank more, not that it was a contest. And she says, and it looks like she was married to someone that was like somebody that made either a producer or I don't think it's a director. I think it's a producer or has another layer of a job in the industry in Hollywood. In it looks like film. I don't think it's theater. I think it's film. I want to say producer or production, but it might be something in between that. Not director. So it's producer or something. I don't know what else would be in between there, but it kind of feels like that. Almost more on the business side of things. Definitely behind the camera, not in front of the camera. That she married somebody that was like that, or in a relationship or a long-term relationship with someone like that. A couple of other names pop in. Stan pops in that name, and then Howard as well. Both of those pop in as well. And she says, yes, and I knew Frank Sinatra. And she said he was a friend, is what she says. And even at that time, the good old boys club and such, she said Frank had a beautiful voice, really did have a beautiful voice. Nothing quite compares to that. She says. All right. Well, thank you so much, Lucille Ball, for having a conversation with us here at Above Life channel. Now it's your turn, viewers. What questions do you have for Lucille Ball? I'm sure she's quite the interesting character. She's got many dimensions and levels to her as a person. And if there's more that you'd like to know, let me know what that is. Put that in the comments below. As always, the purpose here is to inspire your spirit and fill you with hope. I hope that we've done that today through this video with Lucille Ball in the afterlife. Remember, this is your life. So live it. Just live it. Thank you so much for watching.